Welcome to my channel, Delightful Stories. I'll be happy if you subscribe to my channel and like it. Enjoy watching and don't forget to leave your opinion in the comments about the story. Mary, I read in the paper that a businessman, your namesake, died. Are you two related by any chance? A colleague at work asked her. A short girl with short, dark hair turned around and looked at an obese woman with a white headscarf, Lila. For several years now they had worked together at the sausage factory. The work was hard, 12 hours on their feet. They had to take over for each other. They had to oversee production, work with spices, all finished products, transport, glue stamps, print dates. There was a lot of work. Went to spices. It was easier there physically. A woman of 40 had a bad back and could not lift heavy things physically. Respirators didn't help the woman, and her eyes were constantly hurting and tearful. What do you mean, dead? She asked for a smoke. When Mary first joined the plant, she didn't smoke, but she quickly realized that smoking entitled her to extra breaks. At first, she just lied that she needed to smoke like the rest of us, and the girls in the smoking room always treated her to a cigarette. So one by one, she became addicted. Today, she could no longer think of herself without smoking. She sat down on the cold bench. It was October, windy, chilly, raining, and thundering. Fortunately, the smoking room was under a canopy. Mary pulled out her battered smartphone and with trembling hands typed in her last name. The internet quickly gave out the latest news on her whereabouts and the mysterious death of a certain Ted.
"Oh, shit!" she exclaimed. "The articles were numerous."
And they all had the same content. Ted had died. The funeral would take place on October 14. Anyone wishing to say goodbye to the businessman was invited to the cemetery. The newspapers reminded that Ted was the initiator of the movement for a clean city. He himself accompanied youth and school children to Subotniks, burst into politics but did not get into politics, remaining for everyone a simple businessman who wanted to make the city cleaner for everyone. Few people knew about his machinations, about the blood money, about how exactly he did business. If he wanted something, no one could stop it. One day, another businessman came out on top in town. He acted openly, and his success was a fluke. So Ted, in order to appropriate his laurels, merged his business with his. That businessman had no intention of going through with the merger. However, he began to threaten his family and children, and he sold everything he had for pennies and then just left. It was dangerous to contact him. But Ted's father was always considered an even more dangerous man. He was long dead, but when he was alive, even brief encounters with him gave Mary the creeps. He'd always been against their marriage. So, after all, a voice came from behind her. In surprise, Mary dropped the phone from her hands. It fell and hit the dirty tiles on the floor. Oh, what are you doing? She heard the voice behind her again, and Lila swiftly handed her the smartphone, which was used to being dropped and didn't break. Yeah? That's my ex-husband, Mary said. She shook it off and closed the tab that bore news of her ex-husband's death. How much water had passed since then? Mary remembered the first time she had met him. He had been a student then, and she too had just come to this town from the village, enrolled to study. Her parents had stayed home. She was the fourth of her sisters, the youngest. Everyone in their family was an excellent student. She was the only one who was a lousy sheep, so to speak. Her older sisters all looked like her mother. Tall, big, they were combative. They were good at math, good at chemistry. Teachers were already talking about a glorious dynasty until Mary, appeared. The girl was a lover of literary history and had not been pulling her math since early grade school. Outwardly, she was also radically different from her three sisters. She was short, dark, and thin. She was prettier. She resembled her father. which is why she was disliked in the family. Dad died early, falling off a tractor and injuring his back. Doctors said it would heal and prescribed ointments, but 2 years later it turned out that there was a tumor at the site of the injury. It turned out to be malignant on examination. They never told him anything. His wife forbade him to talk. He went to the operating table thinking he would just have a hernia removed and never came out of anesthesia. The doctors then said that it was for the best, that it took a long time for him to die from a tumor, and he would have suffered horribly. The wife and girls took it calmly, and only the youngest daughter was sobbing profusely, seeing her father off to his last journey. She was only 16. She soon left the village, where everything reminded her of the only person in the world who loved and understood her. She was looking forward to change, full of enthusiasm. Back then, she did not yet know what people were like. Sitting in the smoking room, she remembered Ted's face. Lilia was sitting next to her. "Will you go to the funeral?" she asked. They didn't. Mary was uncomfortable with the fact that she had learned about everything from the newspapers. After all, it was about her ex-spouse. They had once been close. Her son could have at least called. No one calls for a funeral, and you have a right to be there in the front row. You knew the man. No one will turn you away, believe me. The press will be there. Nobody wants a scandal. So go ahead. Maybe your son will treat you differently now. Mary looked at her colleague hopefully. The smell of her cigarettes made the woman nauseous. It was really important to her to say goodbye because he never knew that she hadn't held a grudge against him in a long time. Perhaps she should have told him that and said goodbye. She should have remembered him with everyone else and seen how her son would feel about her. For the last time, he only looked at her contemptuously and passed her by. There was so much he did not know and understand. His mother just didn't dare to tell him. She could have, but she didn't, because she only wanted what was best for him. It all started 20 years ago, when Mary moved to a city miles away from her home. Everyone in her family was a doctor, knew chemistry very well. Her mother and sisters got higher education. They were appreciated and respected. Only her youngest daughter decided to study to be a teacher. She passed her exams on the first try, but her success was not appreciated. "It's just literature. Anyone can be a philologist," was what her family said. The girl broke out of the house, and on the same day, she cut off the long braid that her mother had forbidden her whole life to cut. Both Anna herself and her 3 sisters wore their long hair in a thick register. It never occurred to anyone to cut it off. They all considered it something of a shrine. Mary, on the other hand, got rid of it at once and did not regret it. She wore her haircut ever since. She met him at a student party, and he became her first love. He was graduating, was in his final year of law school, and dreamed of working in law enforcement. He had just had an argument with his girlfriend, and then Mary showed up out of the blue. He asked her to dance just for fun, out of boredom and resentment. But when the song started playing, he was already madly in love with her. The ex was instantly forgotten, as if she had never existed. The girl remembered well his white sweater, which she loved so much. It smelled of him and had a slight tinge of cigarettes. They had spent many unforgettable hours together and practically never parted. Alex had become her whole world. "Leave my boyfriend alone," his ex said one day. She came to her senses and decided to take him away from Mary to get him back. But it wasn't to be. "I don't steal other people's boyfriends, I have my own," Mary answered her. Lena was a head taller, a slender, beautiful blonde. Mary knew she was losing to her in every way. She was in the same class as the boy. The guys had dated all 4 years of college until she broke off the relationship. Lena expected the guy to come running to her like he always did and start begging for forgiveness, but this time it was different. At this point, the reason for the rift appeared behind Mary's back. "I will still love her. It's not about the hair. And you, as a law student, should know that you're going to get arrested for that. He said the boy. He took Mary's hand and Lena defiantly walked out of the classroom. She never came near him again. A year later, he got a job as an intern with the local police. He had all the credentials to become a big boss there. He had served and been promoted before he went to law school. And he was predicted to have a great future. They had been dating for over a year when Ted came along. He fell in love with Mary like crazy, but he saw she was busy, so he was just her friend. "You're the prettiest. He's not worthy of you." "He's not worthy of you," you said. Mary blossomed. She became self-confident, got straight A's, never missed a party. Everything was going right in her life. She had a man she loved. Alex, however, paid less and less attention to her and no longer went to student parties. At some point, she began to feel more and more alone. They made plans, wanted to get married, but he didn't even ask her to live together. For Alex, her career came first. Pick me, Ted told her. Mary never knew whether he was serious or joking. The guy was a frequent guest at student parties, even though he didn't go to them, drank with friends, was a hoot and a jolly fellow. Everybody knew him well. One day he chose Mary, but she turned him down because she was single. This hurt him, and he decided to win her back. And then, without noticing it, he fell in love. "You're bound to find a girl you like." "And I'm already busy," Mary replied. Alex came less and less often, asking her to go out, and he blatantly took advantage of this, each time trying to turn the girl against her lover. "You see, he doesn't want you. If he did, he'd be here with you." Well, they danced a slow dance in the center of the hall, and she was the envy of all the girls then. Ted was a tidbit with an enviable fiancé. "He's just serious about getting a place to rent so we can live together." The girl lied. She herself thought her lover had lost all interest in her. Otherwise, he would really be there for her. He would have called, asking how she was doing. And all he talked about was his work, how important it was, and how he was praised, what hopes he had. He dreamed of going higher, becoming a big boss and working in the capital. Mary danced with a friend and was sad, and Ted saw it all, understood it all, and just waited it out. A few months later, Alex told her the news that shattered all her dream. Even though they rarely saw each other, she understood everything and never fought with him about it, because being a student was one thing, but being a working man was quite another. "You won't believe it, they called me to the Capitol. There's a vacancy there that hundreds of people like me are dreaming of getting into. It's a serious secret organization related to national security. I'll be interning with the best," he declared. Mary looked at him with a look of joy. "Do you want us to go together?" Alex suddenly realized what his departure would mean for their relationship. He was silent for a long time, looking at the girl. "I can't take you with me. You'll have to wait for me here." Mary put her arms around him, her cheek pressed against his favorite white sweater. "Okay, how long will you wait?" "Will you be coming for the weekend?" she asked. I don't know, I guess." Alex is gone. He came once a month. The relationship drifted to nothing. One day the guy came over completely out of the blue. She ran out to him from the dormitory late at night and gave him a big hug. "How I missed you," she exclaimed. "You cannot." "How cannot?" She did not understand. "I am there. You are here. I'm here to set the record straight. I have to let you go." The girl sighed. "Everyone has relationship difficulties and we'll get through them. I'm ready to wait for you," she promised. "But I'm not ready. I'm not ready to accept such a sacrifice. I'm sorry." She realized that Alex had come to break up with her. "Did you have someone else?" she asked him bluntly. He shook his head. "No, no one. You're just pulling me back. I'm sorry. I have to move on, and I have to be free now. I won't be able to give you as much attention as you deserve." The girl felt hurt. She had waited so long for him, had been faithful, had not allowed herself to have fun or even go out with her girlfriends. She felt like a wife, his wife. She loved him so much. "You are free. I will not hold you back." "Goodbye," she said, and ran away. And he left and never came back. Mary was desperate. She called Ted. He came to her at once and they talked all night. Mary was crying. It was like the world had collapsed for her. She was ready to wait for him as long as it took. Never reproached him. Never reproached him. Never reproached him. Never reproached him. Never demanded attention. She understood everything except that he decided otherwise. What was it? Ted was happy. He became even closer to her. He came to her all the time. He called her. He gave her a phone so she could keep in touch with him all the time. Her phone was old, constantly going off. Mary called home less and less often and talked to him more and more. He brought her to his house and introduced her to his parents. The guy didn't call her a friend, but said she was his girlfriend. "Meet my Mary," he said. That was terribly flattering. She could call him in the middle of the night and he'd get up and come over. The guy was already working for his father's company back then. His studies were a mere formality so that people wouldn't say later on that the son of the biggest businessman in town was a major. In fact, he was, of course. He did not study well. His father had to pay for him to get excellent grades. Perhaps that was what repulsed Mary about him. He was the son of a rich father. He was allowed to do anything. He wasn't afraid to drive drunk, knowing that no one would take away his rights. He wasn't intelligent. He wasn't well-read. He wasn't goal-oriented. He knew he had everything in life and didn't need to do anything for it. Alex, on the other hand, was too passionate about his work, too eager to achieve everything on his own. So much so that he abandoned her and yet was the complete opposite. At some point she gave up. She was only in her 20s. She was desperate for attention. She wanted to be loved, to feel cared for. She gave in to temptation and started dating Tid. "You are my love, my life. I would die for you," he would say as he took off her dress. She remembered the first time she and Alex had slept together, and a chill ran down her skin. They had been each other's first. He had been each other's first. He had been so gentle, so shy. With him it was different. He had so many girls, it was scary to imagine, but he didn't pay as much attention to any of them. Mary was flattered that all the girls chased him, and he'd come to her, drive her around town, and confess his love fervently. She was the envy of everybody, and she wasn't a pretty girl, never better than anyone else in anything, but the suitor made her feel special and won her over. A month into their relationship, Mary realized she was expecting a baby. Ultrasounds were not yet available in their town. She went to a nearby one, and the doctor said she had been pregnant for over a month, but her last intimacy with Alex had been 6 weeks ago, and she had only been with Ted for 4 weeks. The mistake could have been either way. She was leaning toward the possibility that the baby was Alex's after all. But what was the point if he didn't need her? He didn't need her alone, and he certainly didn't need her alone, and he certainly didn't need her with a baby. Why be a burden when you're ready to be carried around all your life? She went home to her mother. She didn't have a very close relationship with her, but she didn't know who else to go to. She arrived, put her bag on the floor, and went to her former bedroom. Her older sister now lived there. She had divorced her husband and left him for her mother. Her mother worked as the head of the outpatient clinic, and she was a nurse at the same hospital. The other 2 daughters were also from medicine. One became a pharmacist in their own village. The other stayed in town. All were long married with children. "No mother?" the girl asked. It was her day off, and she went on a call. "Someone got sick. Talk to me," Mary said pitifully. Her sister frowned and immediately sat down at the table looking intently at her little sister. She might have been an outcast in the family. But family ties were family ties, and that was what family ties, and that was what family was all about. She told her sister everything, and she listened to her carefully. For the first time in her life, she held her sister's hand in support. "It's a good thing you didn't tell your mother that. She wouldn't have understood." "I understand." "It happens. Don't tell Ted anything. Tell them you haven't done anything since a long time ago. And tell the doctors that the last intimacy was the day you and Ted had it. They will then correct your due date because the ultrasound is inaccurate. It's not accurate. It doesn't matter who the baby is from. The important thing is that he has a family, and so do you. Don't tell your mom. She's not the type to get that kind of thing right. She only had one man, our father. But times have changed, and men today are very different. You do things, and then you're out the door, eh?" They talked, and she was relieved. When Mama came back, she smiled and said that she was doing fine, that she was pregnant by her fiancé, and that they were getting married. The older woman winked at her sister in approval. When she returned to town, she went to the clinic and asked the doctor for the correct due date. I had no one before him. "The ultrasound shows wrong. Please write that it's 4 weeks, not 6, or my fiancé will leave me because of this. He's very jealous, will leave me because of this. He's very jealous." The doctor was a woman. She sighed. "I will write. But you can give birth before your due date. You'll be examined by me. You'll go to the hospital early. Do you understand?" Mary nodded and promised to obey. And the doctor put the right date on her certificate. That's what the girl showed her fiancé in the evening. "We're going to have a baby boy." Ted cried like a baby. He hugged her and told her how happy he was, how he wanted to have an heir, a son, and she kept remembering Alex and wondering if he would be happy or not. He was more down to earth, had a realistic way of looking at things. He would think more about what a responsibility it was to have a child. Thinking about the right way to raise him, what he would grow up to be, she missed him, feeling that he was the only one she could love. The Major's parents gave the boy a scandal, and he said he would leave home and cut all ties with them if they didn't accept his choices. Mary was present during this conversation. She wanted to run away. She felt guilty. He was willing to do anything for her, for the baby, and the baby was probably from someone else. In the evening, she called Helga. "What if they wanted to do a test? Would I turn out to be a liar? I'll be kicked out on the street in disgrace," and she said, "Calm down." "What test? Have you seen enough movies? It's crazy expensive and they don't make them here. And your fiancé's parents will do anything to be allowed to see their grandson. So no one's going to do a test. Besides, it might be his baby." That's what her older sister reassured her. "Yeah, I don't know for sure. I just think the baby is Alex's. It's possible." And the ultrasound was kind of a little bit longer. "If they want to test, you can just say no. You're not lying to anyone. You just don't talk about your doubts. The father is not the one who conceived, but the one who raised." She decided that she would tell Ted the truth. If he asked and if he doubted, let him do the test. Let him decide for himself if he wanted her with someone else's baby. But he didn't ask. It didn't even occur to him that she might lie about the baby not being his. She had decided that she would certainly have many more children with him, and all would be well. She had always dreamed of having a big family. Thinking back to those days, she stirred the spices in a huge bowl. She poured them automatically. She had long been accustomed to doing it by eye, and the proportion was always perfect. This was why she was valued at the factory. All day she was silent, thoughtful, and a colleague, of course, told the others that her ex-husband had died, so they did not pester her with questions. So all day long everyone looked at her cross-eyed, and no one approached her. Perhaps that was exactly what she wanted at that moment. All day long she had been going over and over the events of Ted. After all, they had lived a lot together, been through a lot, and he hadn't always been a bad husband. Not all of his actions had been horrible. They had a modest wedding. The guy's parents never approved of his choice. They didn't care about the pregnancy. They even offered her money for an abortion. The guy, upon learning of this, quarreled with them and, to spite his mother and father, signed Mary. On the same day, he paid the wedding hall attendant and got in without a line. No dress, no rings, no witnesses, just signatures, and that was it. Mary was happy, but there was another scandal at home. She got overexcited and ended up in the hospital for pregnancy preservation. Her son then packed his things and left home. His rich parents came to their senses a little. They thought the girl was a con artist and did not see that their son had really been in love with her for a long time. They were afraid they would lose him and decided to change their anger for mercy. The first to reconcile was the mother. She entered her room, clattering her heels. "Don't be angry with us. Of course we are wrong. We don't know you at all. We were afraid that you don't love our son, but only want our money. We are rich after all. You know, my husband's fortune has doubled in recent years. That's why we think there's a catch everywhere. We must be careful with that kind of money." Mary knew she shouldn't be nervous, and it wouldn't be right to tell her to her face. She decided that for the sake of the child and for the sake of her husband, she would try to listen and understand this woman, even if she didn't deserve it. "I don't want your money. And your son has been trying to win my affections for a long time. I wasn't the one who wanted to be your daughter-in-law." She said it as gently as she could, but it came out harshly. "Well, I'm glad to hear that my son can achieve something, and I'm even happier that he's succeeded in his efforts. I'm here to tell you that there will be no more attacks on you. If it's okay with you, move in with us. We have a huge house. You know my son has lived in it all his life. He's moved in now, but I know it wasn't easy for him. I think he'll be happy to be back. Let your children grow up in this house." She sounded sincere, which was unnerving because not long ago she'd been calling her last words, not shying away from her presence. Her father walked through the door of her room next. Even then, he had a dead pale complexion. Everyone knew he was seriously ill, had undergone several heart operations. "Hello. Since you and my son are married, I need to know that you are not a marriage swindler. I made a fortune, and you can't claim it. You can only enjoy the benefits my son will allow you while you are together. Sign it. It's a prenup. It says that you have no claim to the family's property or money, and in case of divorce you will only leave our house with your belongings." Mary shook her head. That's quite a reception. Has she really decided to ally herself with these robots? Did they even have a heart? Any feelings beyond greed and malice? She silently took a pen and signed all the sheets without looking. They don't trust her, but she decided to show that she trusted them. The girl sincerely hoped that they would become family, that she would be able to win favor. Her husband visited her too, and that day the girl said she held no grudge, and if he wanted her to, she was willing to move into their home. He was happy about it, and as soon as she was discharged from the hospital, she crossed the threshold into their home as a member of the family. Ted's father never said another word to her. He passed away before an heir was born. Mary was then in labor. It was not long before she was scheduled to give birth. It was she who found him in bed with pills in his hands. He didn't have time to take them. Another attack was fatal and no one was around. This circumstance served as a cover for Mary. She gave birth the day after the funeral. The doctor said stress, and only her gynecologist knew the truth. On April 13, her father-in-law died, and on April 14, her son was born, who was also named Grigory in memory of his grandfather. This was insisted on by Ted's mother. Mary, without complaint, agreed. The name wasn't bad. She knew in her heart that her son would not inherit his late grandfather's character, because he had very different genes. Gregory grew up inquisitive and quiet. His grandmother adored her grandson. She found both her and Ted's traits in him, but said that the boy was most like his mother. At that time, the relationship between her daughter-in-law and mother-in-law became warmer, brought them together, made them family. Thus, in a happy marriage, she lived for 13 years. The older her son grew, the more he resembled Alex. It seemed to her that way. She never heard from him again. Alex and his parents never showed up in their town. Her husband had to take his father's place in his company. He spent more and more time at work and less time at home. Over the years, the relationship fell apart. He got used to having Mary around all the time, and he quickly became bored with her, forever without makeup, in her home clothes. A quiet, gray mouse. Mary had seen what her husband's secretary was like, and jealousy was grinding her down, but she wouldn't allow herself to stoop to that. Mary was busy raising her son. He became her whole world. Gregory became willful and disobedient in his transition years. Mary was a mother who felt it was her duty to protect her son from all the dangers of this world. When Gregory came home drunk at 13, she would scold him, wouldn't let him out of the house, and he would climb out the window. Ted had a completely different method of upbringing. He shrugged his shoulders and saw nothing wrong with the behavior of his adored son. He was the only one they had. In the beginning, Mary wanted a big family, many children, and she was supported by her husband. However, as he took his father's place in the company, he began to drink a little every day, smoking before going to bed. His office sometimes smelled of some strange herbs. Mary suspected that her husband was dabbling in illegal substances, but he didn't confess. She didn't go into detail. Sometimes Fyodor was away at work 24 hours a day, nervous a lot, yelling into the tube at his subordinates. He had everything one could dream of in life. The whole world lay at his feet, and nothing really pleased him anymore. Each new million he earned no longer seemed like something great. He developed depression and early gray hair. In addition, he was eating his overstretch and had gained more than 20 pounds in recent years. When they decided to conceive again, it didn't work out. He immediately sent his wife for a checkup, which showed nothing. She was healthy except for a few chronic diseases that almost everyone has. The husband himself did not want to be examined, but she forced him to. The doctor said, "The problem isn't stress, an unhealthy lifestyle. We should change everything. Take up the mind, improve our health, get enough sleep and eat right, stop smoking, stop drinking, at least for a while to restore the activity of the reproductive system." Ted honestly tried. He lasted 3 whole days on the diet, 2 days without alcohol, and less than a day without smoking. He said, "It's God's will, we can do it anyway." He said, "He has been medicated, but like the doctor said, it won't help without a proper lifestyle." Mary dropped her hands and resigned herself to the fact that she would never have children again. There was no time to worry about it. Greg added problems every year. He fought a lot. His teachers complained about him all the time. Then teachers complained about him all the time. Then teachers. By the time he was 13, he had 2 police arrests. Ted solved the problem each time, but Greg never learned anything. His father refused to scold his son, to punish him. The mother had to be strict, and the child became estranged from her. There were constant scandals in the house. The mother became bad to her son. She scolded and didn't understand him, as he thought, and Dad was good. He was very busy, of course, but it was to provide for them. He pampered his son and didn't want anything to do with him. He was probably the man's only joy in life. Mary was depressed too. She wasn't depressed. She just didn't want to do anything. She didn't want to get out of bed. She lost her appetite. Her gastritis worsened more and more. Calls from school instantly caused her heart to race, and her husband's cold detachment only made it worse. She longed for a divorce but hesitated to do so for months. The thought of divorce both frightened and pleased her. Everything was decided by chance. A woman came to see her husband at work. She couldn't reach him on her day off, and the mailman brought a letter marked urgent. It was from his business partners in China. His wife decided she should take the letter to him, especially since she wanted to go for a walk herself. She thought she would leave it with her secretary and not even have to see her husband. Seeing him lately was a dubious pleasure. Mary walked into an empty office. On a day off, I guess that's the way it should be. Ted said he had several meetings scheduled with his partners. She walked over to his office and saw that the secretary wasn't there. Then she opened the office door and found him with the secretary in beautiful lace lingerie. She was sitting on her husband's large wooden desk, hugging her legs passionately around his waist, while he was standing with his back to the door, already half undressed. When he saw his wife, he got scared, hurriedly pulled on his pants, and kicked the beautiful secretary out of the office in the nude, and she herself was frightened, hurriedly gathered her clothes from the floor, and jumped out. Apparently she thought she was going to get her hair pulled out, but she just sighed. "I want a divorce." Those words escaped her lungs, and she was immediately relieved. On the way home, she smiled. It was all for the best. She had long suspected he was cheating on her. This secretary probably wasn't even first on that list. She took the blow calmly. Ted didn't say anything back to her because then, in the office, he was really confused. At home, she packed her things, waited for her son from school, and told him they would move out. All these years, the woman had been saving up for just such an occasion. She knew she wouldn't get anything in the event of a divorce. "Moving? What for?" Greg asked. "Your father and I are getting a divorce. You will see each other as much as you want. I will not interfere, but we have to leave. I do not want to leave. This is my home. There's a pool here. I'm used to living here. I have friends, school, neighbors. You can't take all that away from me just because you decided to leave." She was in shock. "What do I tell my son? He cheated on me. I caught him with his secretary today." She told him the truth, hoping it would make her son feel better and get him on her side. She couldn't lose him. "This is your business. I want to stay at home in my room." The son went upstairs and locked the door. In the evening, her husband came home with a huge bouquet of flowers. "I'm sorry. I swear it won't happen again," he said. She didn't want to make a row. She concentrated on getting her son to come with her. "It's not just your secretary. It's just that you and I are very different. I married you because I thought I could make myself love you. And I did. And now I love you. But it's not the kind of love that keeps people together for years. We have a wonderful son, and our marriage wasn't a mistake. But it's ending. We will be better off living separately, and our child will only be better off too. Our relationship ended long ago. Face it." The man wasn't ready for this. He did cheat a long time ago, but it wasn't because he was bored with her. "What are you talking about?" I slipped up. "Well, it can happen to anyone. I love you. I love you like I used to." "Haven't you ever loved me?" "Then why all this? Why did you marry me?" He was shocked by her revelations, for his feelings for her were real. "You didn't stumble. You've been cheating on me for a long time. Women can sense these things. I stayed away to check, tried not to call you when you were supposedly late at work. But I understood everything. We raised a son, and that's no small thing, you know. Let's just leave it alone without a scene, in a nice way, please." He dropped the flowers from his hands, and he was shocked. And came close to her and looked into her eyes. He was furious. "No, you are mine, and always will be, do you understand? I swore an oath, and I will keep my word. But you swore then, too, that you would be with me, and you will be with me, and you will be Do you understand? And if you decide to leave, you'll never see your son again. I'll make him hate you. He's sick and tired of your constant complaints. So think, honey, what's more important to you, your freedom or your family? He left the room, clearly about to get drunk, but the boy blocked his way. The son heard voices and came out of the bedroom. Is it true that you cheated on your mother? He asked. He had brown eyes, big and expressive, just like Alex. He was swarthy, with long black bangs and a thin nose and lips, just like his mother's. True. But not the whole truth. You don't know everything about your mother. He took his son into the room and poured everything over him. The things that were and the things that weren't. Said Mary never loved him, that she dated somebody else when he was in love with her. Said she was cold, and he was going out of his way to bring the family together. She wants to destroy it. He said that the woman was cheating on him and was apparently just looking for an excuse to leave him for a lover. After the conversation with his son, he emptied the just-started a liter bottle of cognac and fell asleep in an armchair, and in the morning he woke up with a terrible hangover. He was more thirsty than he was breathless. He drained the jug of water that had been in his office and immediately took 3 hangover pills, which made him feel better almost immediately. He sighed, took a shower, and cleaned himself up, then went into his wife's room. Her things were gone. She had gone, leaving only a note. In it, Mary asked him to forgive her and let her and Greg go. He rushed to his son's room, but it too was empty. He did not understand how his wife had managed to persuade him to take her side after all this. He was beside himself. Their phones were silent. Apparently they had changed numbers. Ted had been looking for her for over a week. He was furious when he arrived at the school to find his son. Turns out his spouse was only an hour ahead of him, picking up the paperwork. In fact, that's how he tracked her down. He found out which school his son was assigned to. It turned out she packed her bags and left with the child at the house mother to the village. By that time, my mother had died, and now her sister and her daughter lived there. The businessman arrived at their house late at night and was met by his sister, Helga. "Why did you come?" she asked. The man had connections, was rich and famous, but she was the kind of person one fears nilly, cold-blooded, fearless, with a knowledge of medicine. She had seen death, saved people, treated them, took responsibility for the lives of others. She gave him such a look that the man backed away. "I have come for my son." "Are you keeping him here by force?" he asked. "No one is keeping him here. Children stay with their mother in a divorce, in case you didn't know. And what do you need a son for? You've got that secretary of yours throwing her legs over you. You have no right to him at all." That's when my sister came up behind me. "That's enough. Stop it." Mary was afraid that her sister was about to tell him the truth, that Greg may not be his son. The parents and the son were left alone in the 3 of them. They sat in a small room at a wooden table and drank unpalatable cold tea. "Let's make up our minds now," said the woman. "Greg and I will live here. You can take him whenever you want, considering school time, of course. And he will study at our school, okay?" Her husband did not look at her. He took his son by the hand. "Why did you leave in the first place?" "You were so attached to home, to your friends." "What were you doing in that hole?" his father asked him. The woman lowered her head. "My mother needs me. You must understand me. If she's left without you, she must not be left all alone. Are you getting a divorce? Okay. But I've made up my mind to stay with her. Don't take your anger out on me, okay? And don't take me away to spite her." Dad was in shock. He had lost on all fronts. The businessman didn't say anything else. He just went out and didn't show up for over 3 months. All that time he'd been hatching a plan to get back at his wife. And his feelings for her were still strong, but as you know, love is only one step away from hate. Living in an empty house was unbearable. What had he worked all his life for? Who had he earned it for? He felt betrayed by everyone, so angry that he began to have heart problems, just like his father. He got his first microinfarction just as his wife and son were leaving him. When he got out of the hospital, the first thing he did was get drunk, then sobered up and made a decision. He wanted to act radically. Mary got a job at a local store as a salesman. Ted found this out and arrived at her place late at night. He found the owner and slipped a bundle of red bills into his pocket. They talked and went their separate ways. A week later, they did an audit in the store and pinned a huge shortage on the new saleswoman. The amount was so impressive that she had no idea how she could have stolen such money. Sales were sluggish. They hadn't had that kind of turnover in the first place. Tidy didn't take it. "Watch the cameras," she said, "and the cameras haven't been working for a week." "Somebody took them out of service," the store owner stated. Mary refused to pay because she didn't take anything. She worked hard. The customers loved her. The owner filed a lawsuit. An investigation began, and soon there were witnesses who saw Mary taking the goods out in bags at night. They even found something in her basement. The woman couldn't figure out who might have put it there. The judge handed down a sentence: imprisonment for 4 years. Mary passed out in the courtroom. Her son was in the courtroom with his aunt. However, he was met at the threshold by his father. "Get in the car. We're going home. No one knows about this shame of your friends. Fortunately, your mother has decided to steal away from home. I guess she's used to luxury, so she started sneaking other people's stuff to buy the best for herself. She shouldn't have. Helga was against it, but she knew she had no rights to the child. He was the son of a businessman, according to all the papers. She let him go, and the boy went to his father. There he went back to his friends. They told everyone that his mother left the country for relatives, and the son decided to stay with his father. The man formalized the divorce with her while she was behind bars to celebrate his personal victory. He came to her himself with the papers. Mary cried for days and nights, missing her son, sobbing from resentment until she was unconscious. At times she was beaten by her cellmates to shut her up, but was taken to the infirmary, only for a short time. "How could you do this to me? You set this whole thing up, didn't you?" "You did. I know you did." Ted just smiled. "Don't make such a big deal out of it. I came to tell you that my son is doing well in school. He has benefited from your absence. He's living a normal life. I've already started to introduce him to the company. He's not coming to see you. He is ashamed that his mother is a thief." Mary cried again. She didn't understand how this man could do this to her, after all they had been together for so many years. At that moment, she almost told him that Greg was not his son, but she kept silent, held her tongue, because she understood that it would be the second blow for the boy, or rather, already the third. First, the divorce. The decision to leave with his mother hadn't been easy for him, but he'd done what a real man would do. She remembered going into his room and telling him to his room and telling him she was leaving this house. She went in to say goodbye, and that she loved him and would visit him. And her son said he wouldn't leave her alone, packed his things and left. After that, he was again shocked to hear that his mother had gone to prison. He didn't know how he would face people, his classmates. He would probably get teased at school. He was afraid of being separated from his mother, worried about her, and didn't know if it was her fault or not. After all, the stuff from the store had been found in their house. If she had told him that Greg was not his son, who knows what his husband would have done? What if he would have rejected someone else's child? The child would have had to go back to Helga, to go to that school where everyone knew his mother was in prison. She realized she was too late and had only herself to blame. Revealing the truth should have been done before the wedding. Then, but not now. Her husband had been nasty and mean, but he didn't deserve to know the truth. That was it. Now she realized in that moment, looking him in the eye, that she would never tell him this. It was her cross to bear, and she would bear it herself. God is your judge. These were her last words to her husband. They never crossed paths again. Mary was in prison for all 4 years. She petitioned twice for parole, and twice it was denied. The husband tried. They told her bluntly, "You don't write anymore. They won't let you out before you're supposed to." Mary then calmed down and decided to submit to her fate. She had endured a lot. Beatings, abuse, pneumonia, which almost ended in death. The doctors said she didn't have long to live, so they called her father. He did not come himself, but let his son come to say goodbye. He was sure Mary would die, the prison doctor said. Her son visited her then, and it gave her strength. He cried, begged her not to die, said he loved her still. He was just a child. Mary lost consciousness. He was taken out, but after that she somehow miraculously recovered. When the woman got out of jail, she came to her son and rang the bell on the gate for half an hour. Greg came out to her. He has grown so much, he has matured so much. He has matured so much during this time. Daddy said that you lied about your illness to see me. Is it true? He asked her on the forehead. He was 17. Of course it wasn't. I was on the edge of life and death. You saw me. The doctors called you. Would they lie? She realized that her son had been indoctrinated to think his mother was bad. He didn't believe her. And then they talked dryly for a few minutes, after which her son left for the house. He needed to get ready for his final exams. Mary left. She left him her cell phone number, but her son didn't call her. She called herself once a week. A chasm of time had formed between them and the nasty things her husband had said about her. She never told her son that he had put her in jail, bribed her, slandered her. The mother knew that her son would not believe her and would alienate her even more. So Mary began to live her own life, took a job at a sausage factory, rented a small apartment near work, got a cat. Life went on. Her boyfriend's calls became less and less frequent. She realized he didn't need her and began to wait for her son to reach out to her. And it happened. More than a year ago, he came to her and introduced her to his fiancée. Mary had seen a lot in prison, had learned to understand people. Irene, her son's girlfriend, was insanely beautiful and well aware of that. Mary met them, gave them tea, showed them baby pictures of the boy. They left, and afterwards she called her son and told him what she thought. I didn't want to talk in front of her. Son, it's your life and your choice, and I'll accept it no matter what happens. But I saw that your girlfriend doesn't love you. She loves your daddy's money. That's my motherly instinct, my knowledge of life and human nature. I had to tell you this as a mother, and you decide for yourself. Greg got angry then. She is with me more than you. She loves me more than you. It was you who was with your father because of the money. Do not judge by yourself, Mom. I came to you because I wanted to make things right. But I can see that you don't want that. He hung up on me and they didn't talk for months. Then they just started to find out how they were doing, how their health was. Basically, they became strangers to each other. And now she found out about her ex-husband's death. Her whole life flashed before her eyes. When the lights went out in the shop, the worker left the factory building and walked down the street. Gee, she even felt sorry for him. She had hated him for so long. But what was there to hate? Both had made a mess of things. Both had been wrong. She understood her mistakes now, but it was too late to correct them. She decided that she would definitely come to say goodbye to him. The next day, wearing all black, she went to the cemetery. There, in the huge crowd, no one recognized her. The elderly mother was the only one who noticed her. She sobbed profusely and then approached her former daughter. In-law, you were the only one he loved. I know what he did to you. I know he put you in jail to get his son. It's good that you came to say goodbye. You were more important to him than anyone else, and he sees you here now and smiles, I'm sure. Forgive him if you can. As a mother, I ask you to forgive my son for everything." The woman had grown very old, very gray. Her hands trembled. "I do not hold a grudge. I forgive everything. May he rest in peace." Mary cried too. The woman made her go with them to the cafe for the wake. "You had to be there. You were more important to him than all these people put together. All of his fellow scumbags who came to watch us bury him in the ground. You were the only woman he loved and ruined. Ah, what has time done to us?" She came to the cafe hoping to see her son. The boy was in another car with his fiancée and didn't even see his mother. There were a lot of people crowded at the entrance. The huge downtown cafe had been rented for the day to commemorate the untimely departed. On the side, homeless people crowded in. Apparently, they were waiting to receive what was left after the guests. Gregory saw his mother, but did not approach her for a long time. The people at the huge table were saying kind words. They lied, of course. She couldn't find that secretary with her eyes. Apparently, their relationship did not continue. He didn't have any more women. When you left, he fired the secretary and never went out again. He forgot about himself, started drinking more. He inherited his heart condition from my husband. He got sick when you left. And over the years, his condition worsened. You did your time and got out, and he died. She didn't know how to react. She was uncomfortable. She was sad because not only were there bad things between them, but there were good things as well. How she wished she could fix things with her son. "Why are you here?" A whisper was heard behind her. Mary realized it was her son. She turned around and hugged him. He hugged her too, but reluctantly, apparently so people wouldn't think anything, wouldn't judge. "I came to say goodbye to your father. Your grandmother said I had to come to the wake. She's the one who brought me here. I wasn't going to." The boy sighed. "Don't think I'm not happy. I'm not happy at all right now. It's just that you and your father didn't get along. You hated him. I don't know why you're here. I didn't hate him. You only know one part of the whole story, but there's another part. Believe me, one day we'll talk about it, and you'll understand." Suddenly, she saw a familiar silhouette among the homeless people who were just being taken out to eat. Greg ordered that they all be packed with good portions. "Do you have acquaintances among the homeless, not only among the convicts?" he asked, seeing his mother recognize one of them. His words hurt her soul. She looked at her son resentfully, and he realized that he had said too much. "Sorry, I did not want to offend, but who are you looking for?" Greg asked. She herself did not know whether her eyes were lying or she really saw among the homeless Alex. What is he doing here? Shouldn't he be among the big officials of the capital right now, rubbing his pants somewhere in a stuffy office? She stepped closer and saw the man trying to break through the crowd of vagrants. And they wouldn't let him in line. They wouldn't let him in line, saying, "You're not the only one here." Alex was also taken aback. He obviously wasn't expecting to see his ex. "I'm sorry. Now is not the time," he said when he finally managed to get out of the crowd of homeless people. "How did you end up here?" The woman did not understand. Gregory at this point approached his mother, determined to understand what she had in common with one of the tramps. "This is what I need. Grigori, you are under arrest." Alex pulled the handcuffs out from behind his back and snapped them on the guy's wrists. "What? What are you doing?" The guy was pretty freaked out. And Irene, his fiancée, immediately stormed out of the building. The guy didn't know what was going on. Mary stepped in, tried to find out what was going on and why Alex was here and not in the capital, and why he'd arrested her son in front of a bunch of people at his father's wake. "I'm his mother. I'll go with you," the woman declared. He shrugged. "Okay, let's go." The dumbfounded guests stayed in the cafe, and the three of them went to the station. The woman well remembered how she herself had been there for some time before she was transferred to the colony. Greg was locked up and charged under several articles at once. They were mostly related to fraud, extortion, and bribery. They kept him in custody despite his lawyer's protest. You have to let him out. We'll pay any money as bail. My client is not a criminal. He is not dangerous. There's no need to keep him behind bars. And his lawyer said, "It's not for me to decide, but I'll tell you as a friend. Your client will go to jail, and for a long time. All government agencies have long been interested in the affairs of his company. There have been complaints and grounds for arrest. We kept him under investigation for several years. There were enough crimes to last almost a lifetime. We've got pictures. We've got video. He's going to trial." Mary was terrified. "Say, can I talk to you in private?" Alex forgot she was right there by the office. "Just for a little while. I didn't know he was your son. Hadn't been in town in a long time. How am I doing? My son just buried his father, and you handcuffed him in front of everybody. Why would you do that?" Alex was the same as he was 20 years ago. "That's my job. I had no idea you were his mother. You were disbarred through the courts, weren't you? Were you in jail?" He frowned. The squeamish expression on his face drove her mad. "I did time. The father of the baby put me in jail so he could have the baby for himself. I wanted a divorce and left him, and he made me sit. Happy. And by the way, Greg is your son. You just handcuffed your own child. And I also dreamed of telling you all these years that you were a scoundrel. You left me and I loved you." Mary gave the big boss a resounding slap in the face. Fortunately, no one was around. No one saw her or heard her words except Alex. He caught up with her already on the exit, roughly grabbed her by the elbow, turning her toward him. "Are you serious? Is he my son?" She sighed. "I'm pretty sure you did, but I didn't do the test. You left me. But I didn't know about the baby. Why didn't you tell me?" Alex was dumbfounded by the news. "You didn't need me alone. And with a child, of course, you would have carried me in your arms. You had your career in mind. You're the one who came all the way from the capital to break things off with me. You left me, and I did not have to run after you and beg you to think again. You slept with me and knew the possible consequences. You weren't a little boy." She left, leaving the official on the porch. He was wearing a uniform, had epaulettes. In the restaurant, he appeared in civilian clothes, apparently working undercover, and here he dressed up, showing his former lover in all his glory. He stood on the porch for a long time, trying to figure out what was going on. The next day she went to work, but near lunchtime her boss called her in. "They came to see you there, asked to take you away from the authorities for the day. What did you do?" The boss whispered to her. "Nothing. Just her son's problems," she replied, knowing in advance who she was going to see in the office. The man picked her up from work. She silently got into his car, but he didn't take her to the office. Instead, they drove to the dormitory building. It was now deserted. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, breaking the half-hour silence. "I have to explain myself to you. Then, 20 years ago, I was offered a job with the government. I can't tell you the details. For more than 5 years, I worked undercover. Then our department was transferred and I was assigned to a standard metropolitan unit. With my new stars on my shoulder straps, I couldn't combine relationships and work. Couldn't tell you how my day went because that information wasn't subject to disclosure. My job involved risking my life. That's what I wanted to do. I was suited for that kind of service. It was a duty to my country. I made that choice, and I had to leave my relationship with you in the past. I was married afterwards, and I really wanted children, but my wife was against it. She wanted to live for herself. That's why we broke up. I don't understand that. For the last few years, I've been working on an anti-corruption program. We work out small and big officials. I denounce, I collect data. I have access to all the information I can get. And this businessman of yours, now deceased, has been in our files for a long time. It's not just him. There are others involved. His business partner is under suspicion. And now all the responsibility rests on my son's shoulders. And you put the guy away. He hasn't been with the company that long. It was his father who did all the work. The woman got indignant. Alex shook his head. Unfortunately, there are documents that he signed personally. And there are some pictures of him taking bribes. Yesterday, when you told me he was my son, I almost lost my mind. They took DNA from him this morning. He doesn't know anything. I told him it was a routine procedure, a swab for a virus. I got the results. He's my son. Mary smiled. For so many years she had wanted to know the truth. I felt he was yours. There was nothing of Ted in him. The man handed her the documents, and she began to look at the pictures. One of them had Irene in it.
What is she doing here?
The woman wondered. She is a former prostitute. She has been in the limelight many times with your husband's business partner. We will arrest him too. But the evidence against him is only circumstantial. But she's dating Greg. He introduced her to me as his fiancée, gave out her mother. The man raised his eyebrows. It turns out she's pushing him to commit crimes, and it looks like she wants to take the guy's business away from him through her. Now that his father's gone, it's easy to cheat a young, inexperienced kid. They talked for another hour. The woman told him about herself, about how her life had turned out. The man also shared his experiences. It was as if the years had never happened, as before they were talking and couldn't tear themselves away from each other. I know what we have to do. We have to go to this Irene to nail her to the wall, said Mary. We can try. They got in the car and drove off to rescue their son. The couple found Irene, showed her the pictures. The man forced her to give up everything she knew about her accomplice. The girl was afraid she would go to jail, and to make sure she wasn't hurt, she gave up her partner in crime. It turned out that he had forced her to make love to Greg. Previously, he often used her services when Irene worked as an ordinary call girl, but having colluded with her, he realized that this girl is capable of more and hooked her into the business. She betrayed all his dirty secrets and gave the necessary testimony. Her words exonerated the guy, but not at all. It took almost a week before a policeman could uncuff his son. Mary visited him at the detention center every day. She talked to him, told him how she had been incarcerated herself, told him about being imprisoned by his father. Only he didn't believe her. The day her son was released, the policeman called her, and she came over. You have to tell him yourself. I'll be there for him. By the way, I found something important for you. You're going to be discharged, and the judge is going to resign on his own recognizance. I could put him away, but then he wouldn't testify in your defense. You would be completely exonerated. The owner of that store where you worked is already willing to cooperate. The woman hugged him. She didn't expect to ever be absolved of this stigma. How were you able to pull this off? Working for the government opens up almost unrealistic opportunities. You have no idea how much information there is on everyone. There are just no secrets these days. My son will be on the case, but I'll make sure he doesn't go to jail. They went into the cell together, and the policeman uncuffed the boy. He was depressed. He hadn't eaten or slept in almost a week. Alex held out his hand. Meet him. This is your father, said Mary. They had a long conversation ahead of them. They went to Mary's rented apartment and talked there most of the day. The boy finally realized that his mother had suffered innocently. Alex showed him the certificate confirming that she had been convicted at the businessman's request. He cried, realizing that he had hurt his mother for years, and she was innocent. The son looked at everything through her eyes and began begging for forgiveness, and she was just happy that the child knew the truth, that he understood her. The boy was also depressed that the woman he loved turned out to be a con artist. He couldn't believe it for a long time, but the facts were there. The camera tapes, her confession on video, and witness statements. As the policeman was leaving, the guy came up to him and hugged him. "I'm proud to be your son. You kept me out of jail, out of the mistakes I would have made under the influence. You opened my eyes to who my bride was, and to how much evil I had done to my mother. I feel like a terrible person, but I hope you will stay with us." He was touched by the son's words. He hugged him. "If your mother wants me to, I'm ready. I didn't dare stay with her then 20 years ago. Your life would have been different if I hadn't decided to join the government. But you saved my life. Because of going there to serve no matter what, your road leads to her porch." "I think she still loves you," said Greg. "And I think I'll stay." Mary came out of the other room. Outside, the window had long since fallen dark. The piercing autumn wind howled. Raindrops pounded against the window. Still decide to spend the night here. "That's right. No need to risk it. It's raining, it's cold, you don't need a hotel. I'll make you pancakes in the morning," Webby the woman said. She made a bed for her son and the man she loved. The boy slept on the bed in her room, and she and Alex snuggled up on the sofa. There were no other sleeping places in the house. "You know, I never thought I'd be lying with you like this again," she whispered when they had already turned out the light. "And so many times I imagined that I would meet you and be of use to you again. I thought I'd find a better one, but I didn't, and I didn't love anyone else." From that day on, the three never parted ways again. Alex transferred to their town. Her mother-in-law did not condemn her daughter-in-law for lying, and only wanted to be remembered. She and her grandson came to visit her every weekend. They called each other, and sometimes she visited them. The happy parents got married and became husband and wife officially. They are thinking of taking a child from the orphanage, and their son lives with them. He is already dating a nice girl with whom he is very much in love. He sold his father's company and used the money to start his own business from scratch. He started a security organization and now does what he likes, and his dad helps him do it.